Okay, peace and light, family. I hope that y'all are well. So I am here. I am live. I said I was gonna go live. I put up a post yesterday saying I was gonna go live to discuss defunding the police, the Black agenda, reparations, and various other things. But before I went live to discuss this, I wanted to make sure that I watched part two of Oprah's "Where Do We Go From Here." So if you follow me on Instagram, you saw that I was, from the day before yesterday when it first premiered, that was Tuesday. I was telling everyone to tune into it, because I just really wanted to see what this town hall was going to be about. Once I saw who was going to be a part of the town hall, Reverend Barber, Ava DuVernay, David Oyelowo, and various other valuable people, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, Stacey Abrams, I was all the way here for it. I know some of us already have feelings, based on previous experience with Oprah. And some people were saying like what her intentions were, and all that stuff. I'm not here for that. I'm not here about her particularly. I am here about the platform, for the platform and for the opportunity that she provided, which was basically just to give a space for Black folks, a panel of Black people to speak on the Black experience, to speak on this portion of the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, our civil rights movement, and really talk about the ask. In the promotion, she kept saying like, it's about what are we asking for, which is really essentially saying like, what is the Black agenda? So I was really excited to watch it. It was going to be a 2 night premiere. It was a 2 night premiere. And another thing that really like caught me by surprise was the fact that it was going to be on so many major networks. So the Discovery Network actually decided to broadcast it on all their channels. And if you're not aware, when it comes to the Discovery Network, all of their channels include the Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, National Geographic, not just the own channel. This premiered on, I think, over 13 major networks, which is huge, so everybody had access to it. She also had it streaming free on the own app. It was also streaming live on YouTube. So everyone had access to it. So I saw some people saying like, oh, Oprah's just doing this for money. Not to say she didn't make any money off of it, but I feel like that's not the point. The point of it was to get the message out there. And I think they did a great job of getting the message out there. Now, when it comes to the content of the program, of where do we go from here? First off, I want to say kudos to the producers, the editors, and everyone who was a part of creating Where Do We Go From Here. That that program was so well produced and so well edited. Everything from the commercials, the promotion of small Black businesses, of loan opportunities and grant opportunities for small Black businesses, that was a part of the commercials. The inserts of the voices of Black people, some of the trending things that we saw on social media, like Kimberly Jones, the author, who did the passionate speech and ended with, white people should be grateful that Black people are looking for equality and not revenge. The insertion of the little Black girl chanting, "No justice, no peace." The Tamika Demari speech. So all of this was inserted all throughout the program. The editing, the scoring of it, the music that was played, it was just spectacularly produced. Like, I feel that if anyone, if a person who did not understand the Black Lives Matter movement or the passion behind it, if they didn't understand and they watched it, you definitely left with an understanding of the emotional attachment that Black people have to this movement and why this movement is important. Every single piece, every speech, every excerpt that was chosen to be inserted in Where Do We Go From Here was masterful. It was masterful. And it definitely elicited a lot of emotion. So shout out to the producers, shout out to the editors. Now let's get to the content. So, part one. First off, when I went into this, I was really, I was rooting for it. Hey, how you doing, Don? I was rooting for it, and I was really hoping that this was going to be a space where Black folks got to, of course, explain the Black Lives Matter movement, because we do have to be mindful that majority of Oprah's audience is white. So I was expecting that there was going to be a space where we had to explain the Black Lives Matter movement. Fully expecting that. But I was really hoping that this was going to be a time where we can, discuss our Black agenda, discuss what we are looking for, and really put things on the table. That's what I was hoping for. So part one was really just the explanation of why the movement was so valuable to us, why it was important to us. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms in part one, she is the person who really touched me because Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms is a sister who is a politician. She's a mayor in Atlanta. She just gave a speech with Killer Mike and with Ti, asking people to not loot and not destroy Atlanta because Atlanta is majority Black and all of that stuff. We know we had the 2 college students who were abused by the police. She immediately took action, fired the officers and charged them. So a lot of people were feeling kind of mixy about Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, but she moved me the most from part one because when she spoke, she took the mayor hat off and put it to the side, and she spoke as a Black mother. And I feel like oftentimes when we have Black people in political positions, we disconnect from them. Hey, Corey, how you doing? I'm here, Corey. But yeah, I feel like when we have Black folks in political positions, sometimes we disconnect from them as a sister and as a brother. And she spoke as a Black mother, and she spoke on what did she tell her son the night of, the protest and the night that people were out there looting. And she said she immediately called her son and asked him, where are you? This is not a night that Black men need to be outside. And for her to be able to acknowledge that and to recognize that, it kind of just, reminded me personally that, this is a sister at the end of the day. So it made her a bit more personable. Ava DuVernay was on the panel. Ava DuVernay, she spoke so eloquently in consciously bringing up the Black women who had been murdered, because something that kept occurring time and time again was when they were speaking about police brutality, and they were speaking about, hey, K-Dog, how you doing? They were speaking about police brutality. They were speaking about, Black people who had been killed. They often were highlighting Black men and saying, Black men are in danger and Black men are at risk. And Ava DuVernay, as well as a few other sisters on the panel, acknowledged the sisters and brought up Breonna Taylor's name. And they, brought up the value of the Black women who had also been murdered and brutalized by the police as well. So I appreciated that. But the entire part one was really just like to draw you in. It was, if you don't know what Black Lives Matter is or why we're doing this, let us explain to you why we are doing this. Now, part two. Part two was supposed to be the ask. Part two was supposed to be where we talked about the Black agenda. They said exactly, Corey, I was grateful for that too. They spoke about the Black agenda in part two. They talked about exactly what we were looking for, exactly what we wanted. What are we asking for? Now think about that statement, right? The ask. What are we asking for? Honestly, when I went into part two, I'm thinking, okay, this is where we're talking to the government, we're talking to white people, we're talking to the police, we're talking to the people who brutalize us, who treat us unequal, and we're saying this is what we're asking for. And this is coming from a panel, a diverse panel of Black folks who come from an array of various backgrounds and careers to come together and say, this is what we need to happen. I was disappointed, y'all. I was disappointed in part two until the end. So part two, the first thing, and I wrote it down, the first thing they acknowledged was they wanted white people to admit and acknowledge white privilege. They defined white privilege. They stated, they stated the fact that there's a misconception of white privilege and privilege in general, which I agree with. They, brought up the point that when people hear privilege, they think of affluence and wealth and, white people come from money and all of that, which makes white people deny white privilege. Corey, we're going to talk about that too. But that when people hear privilege and they think of wealth and richness, it makes white people want to deny white privilege because at the end of the day, not all white people are are wealthy and not all white people are rich. But what they did was they defined privilege as being able to walk down the street and not have to be concerned about someone judging you or brutalizing you because of your skin color. Being able to call the police when there is danger in your community and not fear that the police will make the situation worse. That is privilege. So they gave clear examples of how white people have privilege that is detached from wealth. And being able to go to the doctor and go to the hospital when you get sick and know that you will be treated well by your doctors and nurses, because they're not looking at you and denying the amount of pain you're in because you're black, which black people go through. We know it's proven fact that doctors do not take black folks serious when we say we're suffering from pain, especially black women. It's a proven fact that black women are 3 times more likely to die during childbirth than their white counterparts. Those are proven facts. So they did bring that up, and they basically said that we need white people to acknowledge that white privilege is a thing, and that all white people, regardless of your socioeconomic class, benefit from white privilege, which was a good point. Then David Oyelowo, as Corey pointed out, David Oyelowo, basically, he said, I want to come from a spiritual perspective. So, when he said that, I was like, okay, what you coming with, David? If you don't know who David Oyelowo is, he's the black British actor who played Martin Luther King in Selma, which was, produced, directed by Ava DuVernay. So, David Oyelowo said, I want to come from a spiritual perspective. So I'm like, come on, David, come through with the spirit. David Oyelowo said, we need white people to repent. We need America to repent for its sins. And he gave this long, about 1 minute speech, which 1 minute in TV show time is long. He gave about a 1 minute speech about how America needs to repent. So Oprah was like, repent for what? And essentially he said they need to repent for white privilege. Okay, we had already covered that. I do see where he was trying to come from. And America does need to repent for slavery, and they need to repent for, the degradation of the black community. They need to repent for mass incarceration in the prison industrial complex and so many things that America needs to repent for. But this is Corey said Oprah didn't. Don't be shady, Corey. But this is the time for us to be telling them how do they repent. And I feel like when we come with our black agenda and we're saying what is our ask, how could America repent? What do they need to do? It goes to commercial. Boom, we come back. Like I said, the commercials were great. One of the commercials they had was a black man, and it was showing, the experience of a black man with his black son and how they are judged when they walk down the street. People roll up the window, don't want to speak to them. They don't want their children interacting with them. White people don't want to get in the pool with them. Basically, the black experience. And then at the end, he was a judge. So the whole point of the commercial was like, you're judging this man because of his color, but you don't even know what he does, the life he leads, and how he is helping or benefiting his community in one way or another, which I thought was great. But anyway, so they go to commercial, they come back, and now we're getting into the ass. So I'm like, okay, here we go. Y'all, this is when the disappointment immediately started setting in. The ass that they had was voting. They started talking about voting. And as we know, Keisha Lance Bottoms and Stacey Abrams, if you don't know Stacey Abrams, she was a sister who ran for governor, and voter suppression. She lost by 19,000 votes, which is not a lot at all. And it was due to voter suppression. So they immediately start talking about voting. Black people have to vote. We have to vote. And I'm like, wait a minute. This ain't about, are we asking us? Is this about us? I thought the ask was for us to tell them what we need from them, and especially to bring up voting. I didn't feel like, Corey said Keisha looked lost. Keisha, I'm going to talk about how everybody was looking because I was observing too, Corey. But when it came to the voting thing, I didn't understand why they spent so much time dwelling on voting and how black people have to make sure we get out and vote. And we got to make sure that we, vote for local office and, we make sure that we vote in the primaries and, I understood where they're coming from. Yes, black people do need to vote, but why, if this is our black agenda and this is what we're asking for, and we're basically explaining what black folks need in order to feel equal in this country, why are we telling black people what to do? That's the part that I didn't understand. Yes, black folks need to vote. Yes, black people need to fill out their census, which they kept bringing that up too. Make sure you complete your census, complete your census. I'm like, but that this is not us. Are you talking to us? Who are we talking to here? Like, what was the agenda? I thought that we got this put on Animal Planet, and this is on the Discovery Channel and National Geographic, because we know most, for the most part, who watches that. I thought that we were listing our ask of the government, our ask of white people, our ask of our allies. I didn't think that this was to say this is what black people need to do. And most of the time, about, I will say, out of part two, about 20 to 30 minutes was spent on discussing the voting and voter suppression. They did acknowledge voter suppression, how voter suppression is a thing in the black community and how they try to suppress our vote. And they never exactly explained how we can end voter suppression or what we need to do to end voter suppression. They never even asked for voter suppression to end. They acknowledged that it's a thing, but basically said, black people, we got to keep on trying, and we got to keep on going out to vote. Even though we know they're trying to suppress our vote, keep on trying to vote. And for me, I just felt like, okay, but we know that. Like, especially Tuesday, people were out there trying to vote. Folks was out there trying to vote, and clearly votes were being suppressed, but we are still going out there. We are voting. We are trying. The lines was 3, 4, 5 blocks long. You ain't got to tell black people or you don't have to keep beating it into our head that we need to vote. We're voting. We're trying to vote. How about you ask them to stop suppressing the vote and explain how they can stop suppressing the vote? That was the perfect platform to be able to do that. Show evidence of voter suppression. Insert videos of black folks lined up and machines not working in the black communities. Insert testimonies from black folks saying, I've been standing out here for 3 hours trying to vote, and all of the machines are down at my voting center, and nobody else is letting me go vote at any of the voting centers where machines are working and available. Put that in there. This is not an ask of black folks. Why on this platform are we asking black folks to stop inequality against black folks? I didn't understand the purpose of that. Telling us to fill out our census. Okay, you are right. We should start filling out our census. There has been a lot of misconceptions in the black community for decades about the census, because as we know, back in the day, the census was used against the black community. But this ain't the time to spend 20 minutes of truly, aside from the commercials, about a 45-minute program telling black folks to go vote and to fill out your census. No, they never spoke on defunding the police. They never spoke on reparations. Reverend Barber, shout out to him. Reverend Barber kept bringing up, he referred to it as the Black Death, and he brought up George Floyd, and he acknowledged he was really the only one fully acknowledging that, George, that knee on George Floyd's neck, yes, that's the knee that killed him. But he said, and I loved it, he said America had their knee on George Floyd's neck way before Derek Chauvin did. And he said, George Floyd was unemployed because of COVID. That is America on George Floyd. That's America's knee on George Floyd's neck. George Floyd suffered from lack of adequate health care. That is the knee on George Floyd's neck. When he brought up that point, he brought up various ways that black people are treated unequally, from education to the economic wealth gap to health care issues. He is the only person who kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, that black people in America are suffering from more than just police brutality. We're suffering in a lot of ways. I was like, come on, Reverend Barber. He brought that home, and yes, we needed that. We needed to hear him say that. And he was one that I was like, okay, come through. But Oprah did look proud when he said that, and she let him complete that whole statement, which was beautiful, because when you have a panel of that many people, you got to give everybody a chance to speak. But she let him get that entire speech out, which was much needed. But he was the only one who I felt like fully kept pushing the issues that were in the black community. which is great. But what is the ask? What are we asking for? I don't feel like that question was ever fully answered in the where do we go from here. I don't feel like it was fully answered. Black people gotta vote. True. Voter suppression is real. We know that. Black folks know that. But I'm glad they did state that for the people who was watching who may not be fully aware. But what are we asking for? What do we want? And as y'all know, for the past like 3 or 4 lives, when I am discussing the Black Lives Matter movement, my question has been, what is our agenda? What is the Black agenda? In one live, I brought up and mentioned, a few points that I would love to see on the Black agenda. But what is our ask? What are we seeking? What do we want? And I feel like that was the perfect opportunity to put that out there, and I don't feel like that was fully done. Ava DuVernay, Sister Queen, Sister Queen, Sister Queen, Sister Queen. Ava DuVernay, at the end, Oprah took one last statement from everyone about Oprah was like, final opportunity. What are we asking for? They brought up voting again. They brought up voter suppression. They brought up fill out your census, all that stuff. Ava DuVernay was the only person that was basically like, man, bump the ask. This is what we doing. This is what I'm doing. And she spoke about how her and a community of artists have gotten together and they've created the Law Enforcement Accountability Project. And essentially with the Law Enforcement Accountability Project, what I gathered from it based on how she explained it was, it's similar to a sex offenders list. You know how you have the sex offenders list where when someone is convicted of a sex offense, they are required to register as a sex offender. Well, essentially with the Law Enforcement Accountability Project, if an officer has a violent offense like murder, and she used Tamir Rice's murderer as an example. If an officer has a violent offense like murder, they are required to register on the Law Enforcement Accountability Project. And it is accessible to anyone. It is public record. So if you don't know, Tamir Rice's murderer, the police officer, was never fired from his job. He is still an employed police officer in the community. They just moved him to a different department. And people don't know his face. They don't know his name. They don't know anything. So she used him as a perfect example. Someone like him would be registered on the Law Enforcement Accountability Project. And that way, as a community, just like the sex offenders list, we have a list that we can go through of violent police officers who may be in our community, and we can hold them accountable. So you know who to look out for in your community. You know who to record. You know who you can't count on in your community based on their record. And although, thank you, Corey, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. But you know who to look out for. And the thing I love so much about that is because that's the right now action. That's the actionable step. That's a right now thing. Right now, we can look and we can say, you are not good in our community. You are not good for our people. You are violent. Therefore, if we call the police or someone calls the police on us and you come, I'm immediately pulling out my phone and recording you. I immediately know it's not safe to be around you. I immediately know I cannot count on you. And in the meantime, while we are working to defund the police, while we are working to getting our other ask addressed, Ava DuVernay and her team, because she said it's a team of artists, Ava DuVernay and her team are doing something that we can utilize right now in the midst of the movement as we continue to strive and as we continue to move forward, which I thought was just magical. I feel it's just a testament to her power and her action. She's truly taking action. She's not telling Black folks what we should do. She's saying, look, this is what I'm doing, and this is a right now solution. We can ask all day, but I'm coming up with a right now solution, and I'm here for it. But overall, with the where do we go from here, like I said, beautifully produced, beautifully edited, great. Content-wise, the first part, they got me. Explaining the Black Lives Matter movement, I do feel like, if a person is racist or prejudiced and they were watching that and they were disconnected from the Black Lives Matter movement, I do feel like they did a great job of eliciting emotion and creating an emotional attachment for people who may be disconnected. So I think that they did a great job of that. Part two with the ask, that was disappointing. I don't feel like they said what our ask was. They never discussed defunding the police. They never discussed reparations. They never even expressed taking the police out of schools. They never expressed or discussed none of that. They never discussed adequate health care other than saying that we don't have it. They didn't say that we are asking for adequate health care. We're asking for free health care accessible to all Black folks. They never talked about educational equality and funding schools and making sure that Black children can go to school for free and have a quality education, secondary education, free college funding, loan debt relief from college. They never discussed any of that, which I feel like they missed a great opportunity. So let us discuss it. Now, I posted yesterday on my YouTube page, Corey said part two was supposed to start with reparations. Yes! Part two definitely could have. They never discussed reparations. Like, if you're going to talk about what's the ask, all Black folks know that that's the beginning of the ask. That's the basic of the ask. We're at the very bare minimum. They could have discussed reparations, but we're going to discuss all that. So yesterday I posted a list of the 8 abolitions that we are looking for as Black folks. And this is a part of the Black agenda that has been floating around. And this seems to have a lot of Black folks like kind of, talking and deciding where do we stand on it. So the overall thing is defunding the police. And what is defunding the police? What does that look like? And honestly, when we say defunding the police, a lot of people, someone mentioned reparations, Oprah turned part one. Right, someone said reparations, Oprah was like, and we gonna come back with part two. Because we do gotta understand that, she gotta maintain, but come on now, we know what we came for. But anyway, so when we think about defunding the police, right? When people hear defund the police, I know for myself, when I first heard it, I was like, whoa, I definitely got to research this. I definitely need to read more about this, because when I hear defunding the police, the first thing I thought about was we are getting rid of the police department, getting rid of police overall as a whole. And as I did more research and I read more about it, that's not fully what it is. When people say defunding the police, from what I gathered, it's about removing over $100 billion is the funding amount that the police receive as a whole right now in America. So it's about basically reallocating those funds to the Black community. It's about understanding what is the purpose of the police, what is the intention of the police, do we fully need police in the places, spaces, and circumstances that we utilize them for now. If we do not call police for unnecessary reasons and we do not bring them in for unnecessary reasons, which unnecessary reasons will be anything that is not violent. If we do not call the police or utilize the police in those for those purposes, we will not need to fund them the way in the amount that they are funded, and we can reallocate those funds to various other places in the community, or various other departments in the community, and I'll explain that. So essentially, when they talk about defunding the police, from my understanding, it's not fully abolishing the police as a whole. It's not saying that we will not have any type of security, any type of policing in America at all. That is not what defunding the police is. What defunding the police seems to be is, and correct me if I'm wrong, comment please if you want to add something to it, but I'm just going to speak on my understanding. To defund the police simply means to take the funding that the police gets and reallocate it to various departments that could secure the community and resource the community, with the goal of reducing the amount of crime that takes place. For example, if we reallocate some of that $100 billion to ensuring that our communities have adequate food and adequate health care and adequate shelter, it will reduce the amount of crimes. Statistics have proven that in communities where resourcing is adequate, there is more than enough for everyone to survive. Statistics have proven that it is less crime in those communities. Oftentimes, a lot of the reasons why Black folks in particular, but people as a whole, commit crime is out of need for something. And that need, when you need something, when your family needs food, your family needs shelter, your family needs medicine, and you don't have any other means to provide it, people often turn to crime. For example, we could go to the old-fashioned crime that people like to stereotype Black folks with, which is like selling drugs. That is a means to get financial resource so that you can be able to provide for your family. Most people rob, people who do rob and steal because they are trying to get necessities and things to be able to provide for their family. It's all about doing what you have to do to get the resources that you need for your family to survive. So some of the funding of that $100 billion that goes to the police needs to be put into making sure that communities have the resources that they need in order to survive. Perfect. Get that. Another thing that they said that we could use some of the money for is we could invest that money into organizations that secure and protect our community. So some of those organizations, from my understanding, would be that, and I'm just speaking on organizations that I know of that secure and protect the community. I live in Harlem. We still have the NOI and the FOI in Harlem. We have the Black Israelites in Harlem. We have the new Black Panther Party is still very much in New York and Atlanta and a lot of major cities. You have the new Black Panther Party. So these are organizations that secure and protect the community. But we also have the option of creating an organization that's specifically for securing and protecting the community that doesn't have any religious or affiliation. The FOI is very much, of course, is the fruit of Islam. So it's associated, they derive from the Nation of Islam. So there is still a religious association. You have the Black Israelites who are Israelites, and it's still a religious organization. So I do understand that some of those funds could be allocated to creating a police force that is run, owned, and operated by the community, the people in the community. And I think that that's the most valuable point, because I do understand we do have a lot of well-intentioned people, especially Black people, who are police officers. And I had one sister on a live a while ago. I made a comment and I was like, there is no such thing as being a good cop. And the reason that I said that is because of the history of the police force. If you are not aware, and I'm just going to say, give a very brief history. If you are not aware, the police force was founded to unionize slave catchers. That was the sole purpose of the police force. They were founded to unionize slave catchers and have slave catchers enforce oppressive laws with oppressive consequences. If you commit a crime, you are considered a slave. You lose all of your civil rights. If you are a police officer to this day, you are a part of the force. The force was put in place to enforce oppressive laws with oppressive consequences. That is what the police force was founded for. You can research this. You can research it. Thank you so much, June. I appreciate that. Peace and blessings to you as well. That's what the that's what the force was for. That's what the police force was founded for. Now, a lot of people feel and believe that they have evolved over time. I do feel like they have evolved with being as overt with their purpose, right? They are more covert with the oppression. They are more covert or undercover with what they do. And because of that, a lot of well-intentioned people have joined the force. There are a lot of Black folks and people in general who are police officers for the right reasons. They want to protect their community. They want to secure their community, which is great. So if we defund the police, we can have a separate organization that is solely very similar to the police, but it's not founded to enforce oppressive laws. It's not founded to unionize slave catchers. This New organization is founded with the sole intention of protecting and securing the community. That would be the sole intention. So removing police, the police as we know it, is removing that idea of slave catching. It's us moving away from any association with the history. A lot of people want Black folks to forget. They want us to forget about slavery. They want us to forget about the oppression. They want us to forget what we've been through. But how can we forget when we still have a police force that was founded to unionize slave catchers? How could we forget? How can we forget when the 13th Amendment is still alive and well, and it clearly states that that slavery is abolished unless you commit a crime, which means if you commit a crime, you are now considered a slave. You do not have civil rights. You do not have civil liberties. How can we forget when you constantly remind us? Seeing a cop with a badge, if you look at the history of the police badges, it literally used to say Slave Patrol on the badge. That's what it used to say. So how can you expect us to forget and to move on when we are constantly reminded on a daily basis? So the beautiful thing about defunding the police would be, it's not saying we won't have any police, but it's saying start fresh. Let's start over. Let's have a security or some type of policing organization where you're not catching slaves. You're not enforcing oppressive crimes. What you are doing is you are protecting and you are serving your community. Let's start over. Another good point about the police force, about defunding the police that I love so much, is how will we utilize the police? Some of that $100 billion could be invested in counseling in all communities. And that's the thing about the defunding the police. It's not about and hear me out. It's not just about black and white, or Latino, and that. It's not about that. They are talking about revamping the system for America as a whole. And see, this is the power of Black folks. This is the beauty of Black people. When we're speaking about Black Lives Matter, we ain't being selfish. We're not saying, oh, just get the police out of Black communities. Oh, just get the police out of Black schools. Please notice that they say remove police from all schools. Let's revamp the idea of policing for all communities. So even though this is a Black Lives Matter movement, we are still considering all people as a whole, because once again, all we're asking for is equality. All we're asking for is equality, and we are acknowledging that it ain't fair to have police officers in schools nowhere. I don't care what community you live in. Nobody should have police officers in school. So if we defund the police, some of that $100 billion can be allocated into making sure that there are counselors and social workers in schools instead of police officers. Making sure that if someone calls, so if we have a new organization, if someone calls 911 and they say, you know what, I think someone paid with a counterfeit $20 bill like George Floyd, that's not a violent crime. You don't need somebody to show up with guns and pepper spray and mace. You maybe could call out a mediator. Some of those fundings could be allocated to professional mediators. You could call out a mediator to mediate that situation. That is not a violent crime. Maybe that person could just receive a ticket or a citation. Some mediation could occur, and we could say, you know what, brother, you didn't know this was a counterfeit $20 bill. Okay, well, here's a ticket. We need you to show up to court. You pay this ticket, cool. If you beefing, you don't have the money to pay for the goods. Okay, well, a mediator would say, how about we can come up with an agreement between you and the store clerk that you can work off whatever you bought or whatever you're trying to purchase. You can work it off. Let's get back to a system where we are a system of good faith, where we are bartering and trading. How about if you have a person who is suicidal, you don't call the police and the police show up with guns and pepper spray and a baton to help try to talk someone down off the ledge from committing suicide? Why are you showing up with a gun and pepper spraying a baton if somebody is trying to take their own life? That's a situation where instead of the police coming out, you got a counselor coming out. You got a social worker, a therapist, a psychologist coming out to talk to that brother or sister. So the purpose of defunding the police is to reallocate those funds and understanding that we have the power to call the necessary people to resolve the issue that has come up. When we have problems in our community, we're taught to call 911. You got an issue, call 911. You got a problem, call 911. But every time we call 911, even notice it could be a fire, it could be a sick person, the police come as well. It's the police, the fire department, the ambulance. They'll ask you if you need an ambulance, they'll ask you if you need fire, but the police usually always come. But the question is, do we always need police officers to come? No, we don't. We don't always need police officers to come. So if we defund the police, we have the opportunity to invest those funds in our necessary community workers. It's about having various organizations of community workers who all have the goal of resolving communal issues. If there is a fight, if there's a beef between two people, you can have your counselor, your social worker, your mediator come out, and they intervene in that situation. Now, do we need armed people in the community? Absolutely. But armed people, armed citizens who come to protect and serve should only come if there is a violent offense occurring, if there's a shootout, if there's a violent crime. That's when someone could come and be armed and prepared to protect and serve in that way. But if it's not a violent crime, we should not call out a person who has the potential to inflict deadly violence. Hey Jones, how you doing? We shouldn't have to call out a person who could inflict deadly violence against someone. So I think when we hear defunding the police, we need to be clear about what we mean by defunding the police. It's not, oh, our community is just left to run amok. No, it's about taking those funds and allocating them to proper places and proper organizations who could properly protect and serve our community, whether it's mediators, psychologists and psychiatrists, social workers, and promoting just the welfare of our community and having our folks live a healthy, adequate life. That's what we mean by defunding the police. So with that understanding, I am very much for defunding the police. And there is a meme that's going around on social media where, they said defunding the police sounds crazy until you realize that they've been defunding education for forever. And essentially what that means is if you pay attention to the budget for education, they've been slowly but surely depleting the budget for education and defunding education for years. That is why we now have to pay more to be educated. That is why college tuition keeps going up. That is why charter school tuition keeps going up. That is why most of our schools are under-resourced, because the resources to fund our school keep going up. They are defunding education. Our schools are not getting the necessary budget that they need to be able to run. I am a special educator. I've been in special education for over a decade now. And especially in special education, we do not have what we need. I'm also a behavior therapist, applied behavior analysis. Most schools do not have a licensed ABA therapist in it. ABA, applied behavior analysis, is the only scientifically proven effective method to work with and help children with autism. The numbers for autism are skyrocketing. The diagnosis of autism is skyrocketing. Every school should have at least one licensed ABA specialist. It does not. Why? Because it's very expensive to get an ABA specialist, and schools are not resourced to be able to do that. So when you recognize that schools have been being defunded for a long time, you see that defunding the police does not sound as crazy as a lot of us think it is. Now, is that saying that it's right that schools are defunded? Hell no. But it's saying that if we defund the police, a part of that $100 billion could be reallocated into the education system. As we know, education is a resource. So if we're talking about taking some of that funding and making sure that communities have the proper resources they need, it's about making sure that there are no more food deserts. It's about making sure that we have the economic resources that we need to survive. It's about making sure we have what we need. And Hope said yes to police in schools. Yes to police in schools as far as you feel like we do need police in schools, or yes as far as removing police in schools. I'm asking you, Hope. But as a whole, it's about making sure that the communities have exactly what we need, and education is one of them. So a part of that $100 billion could be pushed into. You said we don't need. Corey is saying we don't need police in schools. We need school counselors or nurses, or we don't have school counselors or nurses. A lot of schools don't have a nurse. I worked at a school, y'all, an elementary school, where, think about this now. Think about how many elementary kids, kindergartners to fifth grade, think about how often they get hurt, how often they fall. There was no elevator in the school. The school is 3 floors. This is a school in New York. School is 3 floors. There's no elevator. Kids fall up and down the steps all the time. You have kindergarten kids going up and down the steps. Gym is happening. Recess is happening. Kids getting hurt all the time. There was not an all-day nurse at the school. The school was sharing a nurse that was donated in partnership with the local hospital. Donated in partnership with the local hospital. The nurse circulates between 3 other schools. So the nurse had hours. Is that not crazy? If a child was injured and it was an injury that you yourself could not treat, or that you couldn't send them to the main office to get treated by one of the office assistants, like a Band-Aid, a bump, or a bruise, you had to call their parents so their parents could come pick them up and see if they need to go to the hospital. If a child bumped their head and there was not a nurse to check to make sure that they were okay, and that there were no signs of dizziness, no signs of concussion or anything, and they could continue on in the school day, essentially, we had to call parents, and parents had to come pick them up. But think about this. Think about the effects, the domino effect. If a parent is under-resourced and they don't have what they need in order to make sure their household run, that parent cannot leave work to come pick up their child. A single mother or a single father cannot leave work to come pick up their child. If I got to work to pay my bills, because if I don't work this specific amount of hours, I'm not going to have enough money to make rent or have enough money to put food on the table. That is the domino effect of being under-resourced. So your child could be sitting here with a concussion, but you can't even come get your child, and we don't have a nurse in the school to be able to treat them. You can't even come get them because your household is under-resources, because maybe the school that you went to was under-resourced. Therefore, you didn't get the adequate education you needed to be able to move on to secondary education, which you also couldn't afford because that ain't free. So now you are forced to work a minimum wage job to provide for your children, and you're in a food desert, so your children don't have the healthy diet that they need. They get sick much more quickly. We don't have adequate health care to heal our children and our adults and our elders when they get sick. It's a problem. It's a problem, you guys. It's really a problem. So some of the funding that the police receive could literally go to making sure that our communities are resourced in the way that they need to be resourced. Reparations, Corey, let's get to it. Reparations. So when it comes to defunding the police, I'm all the way here for it. I want to go back and read the comments real quick before we move to reparations. I want to go back and read the comments about policing in schools. I wanted to get the clarity from Hope when she said that we do need police in schools. Okay. Don said, I am not an American, but I go this where I'm from due to my melanin. Oh, you go through this where you're from due to your melanin. Don, let me tell you something. So Black folks everywhere get mistreated, and a lot of people, shout out to the actor, I think his name is John Boyega, and he brought up, the lack of equality in the UK and London, and people all over the world are protesting inequality and police brutality against Black folks, and I think a lot of people are surprised, but they said over 24 other countries now have joined in with the Black Lives Matter movement and are bringing recognition and light to the fact that Black people in their home country are also mistreated, and also in predominantly Black countries as well. Some countries in the Caribbean have joined as well, because darker skinned people are mistreated in their community by the police. So there's police brutality in multiple other places. So thank you for bringing that to the forefront. You talk a lot of people out of killing themselves, Hope. And that's the thing, So Hope said yes to police in schools. Corey said we don't have counselors or nurses. We don't need police in schools. Hope says she talks a lot of people out of killing themselves daily. And so Hope is a police officer. And police, and that's the thing. I don't want to make it seem like police don't do anything and they are not useful. You know, like I said, there are a lot of people who join the police force with good intentions, and regardless of the history of the police force, they join with the goal of doing the right thing. But Hope, what we discuss when it comes to defunding the police, a person like you who is good intention and you're there for the right reasons and you're doing your job, and you know you're doing more than your job, you're doing better than your job. You know, if you're there for the right reasons, if we defund the police, I should say when we defund the police and we start our new organizations, people who have good intentions and who are police officers could join those organizations and be paid and receive health care and all the good benefits that you receive now. But you are now a part of an organization that is truly meant to protect and serve. And we could mind how we train the new organization that's protecting and serving, how we how we train and how we care for police officers who would be a part of this new organization. It wouldn't be founded on the idea of patrolling and slave catching. You know, it'll be founded for people like you who have good intentions and who are doing the right thing, to be able to have your partner and people who you are aligned with who are just as good, well intended, and as good as you are. You know, so it's not just so much about the idea of, well, we just need to weed out the bad apples. If we start from scratch, we ain't got to have no bad apples. You know, we don't have to have no bad apples. You said Hope is right. Let the Panthers handle it. Listen, okay? Hope said if they defund the police, let the Black Panthers or someone else handle it. Police don't get paid enough now. I can listen. And see, that's another thing. If we defund the police and we reallocate those funds to the new Black Panther Party, to the NOI, the FOI, you know, to people who are doing the right thing and protecting and serving and securing the community in the right way, Hope we could make sure that the officers we do have are adequately paid and receive proper health care and all of that stuff. But that's enough with the defunding the police thing. I want to move on to reparations, because realistically, reparations is one of the other major asks that we have on the Black agenda. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I was talking about how I was watching Bob Johnson interview, and I spoke on how essentially I was very irritated, not with Bob Johnson, because he brought up a lot of great points. Right now, if you don't know, Bob Johnson is lobbying for reparations for Black people. Bob Johnson is the founder of BET. He sold the company, but he's the founder of BET, Black man, first Black billionaire in America, all that good stuff. But he's lobbying now for Black folks to get reparations. And I became very irritated because I feel like we keep repeating the same points of reparations. And at this point, it's not even about should Black folks get reparations. It's not even about that. I feel like you can't even argue or deny that. America has given reparations to Japanese for internment camps. They've given reparations, something like reparations, to Native Americans by giving them land and, you know, opportunities in the form of casinos, which this is all debatable, okay, as far as how much they benefit from that. But they've given Native Americans opportunity to get wealth equality or their own form of income, their own form of wealth, through, you know, giving them land, the opportunity to open up casinos, being tax exempt, so on and so forth. They've given reparations to Italian people. So many other ethnic groups who have been done wrong in America have received reparations, except for Black people, except for African American people. And I feel like the issue is no longer should Black people get reparations. The issue is America willing to admit how vile and destructive slavery actually was and continues to be to the Black community? It's about when America gave reparations to Japanese people, they said they apologized for the genocide. They actually not only gave a check, but they gave a letter of apology, admitting that the Japanese internment camps were brutal, destructive, lethal and detrimental as a genocide against Japanese people. That is what they said. So America admitted to what they had done wrong. The issue with Black folks receiving reparations or not having received reparations is America is yet to admit how destructive, how vile, and how detrimental slavery has been to the Black community. That is truly the issue. That is why we have yet to receive reparations. America has not yet admitted what they have done, and I think that it's for two reasons. Reasons number one, if America admits how destructive and how vile and disgusting of a genocide slavery actually was and continues to be, that would be number one, white people admitting that their ancestors were vile, disgusting, destructive leeches of the Black community. That is what they would have to admit. They would have to admit that their ancestors were disgraceful human beings. That is one reason they don't want to admit it. Reason number two is white people present day would have to admit that all of their wealth, all of their fortune, all of their superior supremacy power is derived from Black folks, from Black blood, Black sweat, Black tears, Black labor, and our ancestors are truly deserving of all of the fruits that they benefit from. We put the labor in. We grew the plants, we grew the trees, we picked them, we tilled the soil, we planted, and we did it again and again and again and again and again. We built and built and built. There's a poem by a poet named Preach from Def Comedy Jam a long time ago. You can look it up. Def Comedy Jam, Preach. The poem is called Cotton. And at the end of the poem, he says, we built this shit. We built this. And I think that the second reason white people don't want to admit how vile and destructive slavery was because it would be admitting that we built this. It would be discrediting their wealth. It would be discrediting their work. And we know that everyone loves to believe that they earned what they got. Everybody likes to say, America is the fabric of the woe is me. I worked so hard and, I pulled myself up from my bootstraps as they tell us to do. They try to make it seem like that is what they did. White people love talking about how, my ancestors were Irish immigrants and were Polish immigrants and all that other stuff. They love try to make it seem how they worked so hard to get what they got, when in fact, that is not the case. Even if your ancestors were Italian, Polish, or Irish immigrants, you still have white privilege. And your white privilege that you benefit from to this very day is because of the labor that we put in. One of the brothers, the brother's name is escaping me, but the brother on Where Do We Go From Here, he was so eloquent in stating, he said, privilege is like a seesaw, and the only reason you are up is because we are down. That is the only reason you are up. So if white people admitted how horrible slavery was, that would be them admitting that everything they have earned is not earned at all. It is not actually theirs. It is ours. And it should all be given back to us. From the land, the houses that they have, the cars that you drive, the wealth that you have earned and gained, those trust funds that your children got, that belongs to us and our children because we actually worked for that. That's what they would have to admit. They would have to admit that they didn't earn a damn thing. Okay? And that's why we haven't received reparations as Black folks. So when it comes to understanding America not giving us reparations, I really want Black folks to stop arguing that we deserve it. We deserve it. It's not even a question. America gives reparations, has given reparations, continues to give reparations to everyone else. Everyone else, over 80,000 Japanese people received reparations because of internment camps. Over 80,000. Black folks have not received a dime. So instead of arguing whether or not we deserve it, we know we deserve it. It is ours, period. What we need to do is, I feel as Black folks, we got to start gathering an understanding of how reparations should be allocated. Because I feel like We need to be clear. We need to be clearer of what reparations would look like. Do we want to check? Are we looking for cash? Are we looking for land? Black folks would, thank you so much, June. I appreciate you again. Thank you. Black folks were promised 40 acres and a mule. We have not even received that. And that's another reason we got to stop fighting over whether or not we should get reparations. Because America already said they would give us reparations. They already promised us reparations in the form of 40 acres and a mule. They already said that we should get that. So it's not about whether or not we should get it. It's about give us what you told us you would give us. Now, do we still want 40 acres and a mule? I don't know what we're going to do with a mule, but 40 acres, hell, we'll take it. You know, we will take it. The thing is, if we have reparations, how is it going to look? What is it going to come by? We got to stop saying, oh, y'all should give us reparations. No, we need to start holding them accountable and say, you said you were going to give us reparations. Now, here is how we want it. Here's who you shall distribute it to. This is when it needs to be done by. We need to start having demands and demanding them to keep their word. Another thing that the brother said, and where do we go from here? The same brother, I wish I knew his name. If you know his name, please put his name. I wish I knew the brother's name. But he said that's something I want white people to do, white folks who claim they're our allies, is stop disappointing us. Stop letting us down. I need you to be an ally all the time and not just some of the time. So if you feel like, because I know we got a lot of new allies, a lot of new people who are realizing how much Soul, thank you so much, Soul. I actually want to bring up a good point that you had brought up in a comment in a previous live. That was a great point, and I want to acknowledge that. But you know, the brother brought up how in the end of the day, Black people, something we got to do is we got to hold our allies accountable. Everybody want to be an ally until it's time for you to put in the work to prove your allyship. You know, when you are for our allies, our kente cloth bearing allies, okay, Nancy Pelosi, you know, our kente cloth bearing allies. What we need y'all to do is hold your people accountable. We need you to be able to say, look, we said we was going to give these folks reparations. We got to pay up. Now, how y'all want to do it? And bring in our Black agenda. What are we looking for? Do we want our 40 acres and a mule? For me, hold what Shirley Caesar said, hold my mule. You can hold the mule. Run me my 40 acres. Are y'all willing to give it in the form of a check? Cool, give it in the form of a check so we could buy our 40 acres, or we could buy our education so that we can be able to in the future buy our 40 acres. However you want to give it, cool. Who shall it be distributed to? Who shall it go to? That is really a huge thing. Who should reparations go to? A lot of people say African descendants of slaves, but the discussion is, and please, if y'all have a deeper understanding, let me know. You said she looked cute in that cloth. Corey, don't get fought. Don't get fought. I know you ain't talking about Nancy look cute in the cloth. I know you ain't talking about Nancy look cute in the cloth. You know, she was coordinated though. She was. I give her that. They had it matching, but no. So the thing about, you know, who should it go to? African descendants of slaves. How is that determined? As we know, we got a lot of Black folks who are in America who are not necessarily African descendants of slaves in America. And we say African descendants of slaves, and I feel like we got to clarify that, because you have African descendants of slaves in the Caribbean, in Jamaica, in Trinidad, in Haiti, and in Europe, in Asia. There are African descendants of slaves dispersed everywhere. June said African Americans. So if we're saying America needs to give reparations, who is it to? Is it only to African Americans, African descendants of slaves who were born here in America? How will we prove that? How will we prove that? How will we prove African descendants of slaves born in America? I know, Corey. How will we prove that? Are you going to take a DNA test? Yes, St. Martin, Panama. My father's from Panama. His ancestors were slaves in Panama. My father's a Black man from Panama. You know, his whole family's from Panama. But, you know, the African people were dropped off. As we know, if you studied the transatlantic slave trade, we were dropped off and dispersed everywhere, including Mexico as well. You know, so we were dispersed everywhere. We were used literally as a good for bartering and trading. You know, we were product. So that's the thing. Like, who, when we talk about America giving reparations, is it only to African American descendants of slaves who were brought to America and America was their final resting place? And how would that be determined? How would that be determined? Because now this is just for the black folks. Okay, if you are not black and you watching this, or this comes across your palate, this ain't none of your business. This is black people stuff. As we know, black folks, everybody don't want to be black. Everybody don't claim blackness. A lot of our, you know, brothers and sisters who are from the continent and from the Caribbean who come to America, they do their best to disconnect themselves and disassociate themselves from being African American. Okay, I've had that discussion many a times, especially with a lot of my, you know, brothers and sisters who come from the continent, who parents come from Nigeria or Ghana or Guinea or South Africa or Senegal, and they were born in America, but they don't consider themselves African American, right? And they always want to acknowledge how my family wasn't slaves, so I'm not African American. I've had that discussion quite a few times, but when we talk about reparations, all of a sudden they get real we. They get real we. Okay, it becomes, when we talk about reparations, it becomes a lot of we talk. Okay, but when we talk about who being educated and qualifying for tax exemption and all of that, that's when they want to separate. But when we talk about African American people receiving something, or African descendants of slaves, it gets real we-ish. Okay, so how will we, even David Oyelowo, on Where Do We Go From Here, he kept saying, you know, our ancestors were enslaved. And I do see where he was coming from. Because even if you remained in the continent, your ancestors were still stolen from the land and enslaved. But does that mean that America owes reparations to even black people on the continent because their ancestors were stolen and enslaved? That's where the topic gets a little tricky and a little touchy. That's where it gets like kind of who gets it and who don't. Well, you have to take a DNA test. I have quite a few friends who were born in America, born right here in New York City. Their parents, though, are African. They're from Africa. They're from South Africa, from Guinea. I have friends whose parents are from Ghana, so on and so forth. The thing about it is, would they get it? Well, they get it because they can come. They're black, they're African American, technically, South African American, Senegalese American, so on and so forth. But would they get it? And how will people be able to prove that they are not African American descendants of slaves? That's where it gets a little bit touchy. I'm reading some of y'all comments. Don said cutthroat in themselves. Absolutely. How do we find our ancestral true roots safely? That's a good question. Jones, I have no idea. And you know, I have a lot of people in my family who've done the Ancestry DNA, Ancestry.com, 123 and Me. They've done all of that to try to prove their ancestry and all of that stuff. But then it's gonna be like, what is the percentage? Is it 1/33 like it was back then? You know, the one drop rule. Like, what are we doing? How are we counting who gets the reparations? And I think that's really, at this point, that's what we gotta come to for black folks. That's what we got to be able to decide. Lana said, bottom line is we need unconditional basic income. I agree with that, but would that count as reparations, or is that just an ask on a black agenda? I think universal basic income should be on the agenda aside from reparations. So when I'm thinking of the black agenda, and I'm about to close, you know, like the preachers, if you've ever been to church, you know, been to a black church, you know, I'm about to close. When I think about the black agenda, I'm talking about economic equality. I'm talking about education equality, free health care for black folks, for all people, but free health care for black people in particular. I'm speaking about defunding the police and reallocating the funds to providing adequate resources for the black community. I'm speaking about ensuring that black folks have there is universal basic income for everyone, and ensuring that black people have adequate income to be able to fund our homes and our livelihood, to do away with food deserts, making sure that our grocery stores are adequately stocked with healthy options, reducing the prices for fruits and vegetables in the Black community. These are adequate and actionable things that we can do. And everything that I just named, as far as education, resources, including food, education is a resource, healthcare is a resource. We can connect all of the detriment, all of the lack thereof in our community to slavery. All of this could be connected to slavery, all of it. So the reason we have these things on our Black agenda, the reason that we're talking about economic equality, healthcare equality, resource equality, the reason that we're talking about all of these things is because we can literally trace how, because of slavery, Black people have not been properly educated. Therefore, we deserve free education. Because of slavery, Black people have not been afforded adequate health care. Therefore, we deserve free health care. Because of slavery and the foundation of the police being slave catchers, unionized slave catchers, Black people have not been properly treated, protected, or serviced by the police. Therefore, we should defund the police, and we need to reallocate those funds to ensure that we have adequate health care, to ensure that we have adequate resources in the Black community. Because of slavery, Black people have not had adequate access to the proper food that we need in order to be healthy and to be well. Therefore, we need to make sure that we do away with food deserts, and we have adequate and proper access to the food that we need in order to ensure our wellness in our community. Because of the trauma of slavery, Black people have had to undergo mental trauma, mental violence, mental breakdown, mental destruction. Therefore, we all deserve free counseling. We all deserve free therapy. Everything that I just listed on the Black agenda, we can trace back to the detriment that was slavery that America implemented on the Black community. You did this to us, therefore you must repair what you have done. You must right your wrong. Reparations. That is reparations. Our Black agenda is reparations. Because of slavery, we have had to be victims of redlining. Black people have not had the opportunity to earn, to buy, to purchase land and till the soil that our ancestors ensured was in adequate care that you may be able to have. Therefore, we deserve a piece of land. We deserve some land. We deserve that. So all of this is on the Black agenda. All of this is a part of the Black agenda. And everything that I literally just named that we asked for, we can trace back to the destruction that is slavery. That's our Black agenda to me. And I feel like for the most part, it covers every aspect, every detriment. And when it comes to the spiritual side, one thing our ancestors did a great job of is keeping our spirituality intact for the most part, no matter what has been done. No matter what has been done. Our ancestors did a great job of holding on to our spirituality and making sure that, through oral tradition, we were able to keep and maintain our spirituality. So when it comes to the Black agenda, including some spiritual things, I wouldn't even want them to handle that. I wouldn't even want that in their hands. I would not want that in their hands, period. Okay, we can handle that. But when it comes to mental and physical reparations, we are owed that. We are owed it. I am going to go back and read some comments really quickly. Let me see. Reparations should only go to African Americans. I agree with that. Reparations from America should go to only African Americans. Every country deserves reparations. Every country deserves reparations. And reparations to countries in Africa need to come from the countries that colonized those African countries. For example, the French owe Senegal some reparations. The British owe South Africa reparations. So for our brothers and sisters on the continent, you too deserve reparations. And those reparations need to go to come from the countries that colonized you. We as African Americans were colonized by European people from everywhere. okay, who came and conquered America, not founded it, but conquered it. So Spain, Christopher Columbus, so trifling ass. Um, he said we can't spend time determining who is worse. I agree with that, Lana. We shouldn't spend time determining who was worse. Um, Take the money we spend on military and give it to everybody. Defunding the police. Some of that money could be used for reparations. Reparations should be for those, this is from Jones, reparations should be for those who were affected by slavery directly. I agree. The generations after and so on. So you think, Jones, you think reparations should be like we should get a monthly stipend or a tax, we should get a black folk tax exemption? I think so. I think black people should get should be tax exempt. I think so. Um, Give it out and let us live our lives. I agree with that. Sola, I think in Kentucky, the mayor/governor has announced he's going to give black, not the other groups, free health care. I have to look more into it. Tyreek mentioned it. Tyreek Nasheed. I agree with it. That'd be dope if he does that in Kentucky. That'd be dope if black people could get free health care, but it should be universal. But if it's a state to state thing, as we saw with the closing because of Corona, once one state do it, other states start considering it. So hopefully Kentucky will be the ones who kick it off and have other states thinking, but it should be universal free health care for black people. Lana, but also poor whites are not properly educated either. That's why everyone needs to get access to education. Yes, education should be, access to adequate education should be a universal thing. However, with poor white people, they are a separate conversation because poor white people still benefit from white privilege. So I don't want us to lump poor white people, and I'm not saying you're doing this, Lana, I'm not saying this at all, but when it comes to bringing poor white people into the conversation, I don't want anybody jumping on our bandwagon. Okay, shout out to Janelle Monáe when she said, I'm running out of space on my damn bandwagon. I don't want nobody else jumping on our bandwagon. Poor white people they are part of the fight for economic equality, but when it comes to us and what we've been through, our need for free education, free healthcare, free counseling services, and all of that is a little different. You said the 1% don't include a lot of everybody. The 1%, Lana, doesn't include a lot of everybody. But the thing is, I think that we have to remove sole focus from the 1%. And let's think about the 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, hell, the other 45%, because the wealth is more than just the 1%. The 1% may be the wealthiest, but wealth is allocated more than just the 1%. I think it's about moving away from just talking about wealth and money and focusing on wellness. That's the thing. When it comes to speaking about privilege, we have to move away from just talking about money, because when you start talking money, you exclude a lot of people like poor whites out of the conversation. What we're talking about is privilege. Poor white people can still go walk down the street and be treated differently than a black person. Poor white people can still go to the hospital without health care and will probably be treated differently than a black person. A poor white woman can go in labor right now and she is still 3 times less likely to die than a black person. Okay, so poor white people still have white privilege. So I think we have to, and that's why when it comes to like the black agenda, it's about separating the conversation of wealth. It's not solely about wealth. What it's about is the benefits of privilege. The benefits of privilege. Not just about wealth, the benefits of privilege. You said, I don't think we're going to get further than that right now without allies. Somebody else brought that up. They brought up, having allies and everything. And could we move forward without allies? Terry Crews said that if we have a conversation about black equality without including white people, then you're creating black supremacy. Terry, sit this one out. Okay, sit this one out, Terry. Sit this one out. All right. Some people just need to sit this out. Okay, you just go be security or something. Sit this out. We don't need that right now. The thing about it is, yes, we do need allies, but what truly is an ally? As I said, an ally, don't just be an ally in front of me, be an ally behind closed doors. I don't need you to stand in my face and tell me you're an ally. I need to be able to see your work and see like, okay, you doing some stuff. I don't want to see you coming to me dressed in kente and to tell me that you're an ally. I should be able to look at your record and see that you've always done work for Black folks. I need to see that, okay, you're an ally, you're in political office. Have you discussed the Black agenda with your team? Have you brought that up? Is that what you're pushing for? When they talked about voting and voter suppression, one of the sisters said, well, who the hell are we voting for? Who are we voting for? She brought up the fact that how many politicians have talked about voting, and we need to vote, and then they'll come with the Black agenda, but as soon as they get in office, all of a sudden you don't hear about that Black agenda no more. And right now, everybody's talking about Joe Biden. Joe Biden, honestly, he is the only option. He's the only option, but vote for Joe Biden and get what? Has Joe Biden's record proven that he is an ally? He wrote the crime bill. Has he proven that he's an ally? Has Joe Biden proven that? Does his record reflect allyship? Don't just tell me you're an ally. Don't just come looking like an ally with your kente on. Show me allyship. Show me allyhood. Show me that you are for Black Lives Matter. That is what we need. And for white people who are not politicians, what are you doing with your family? What are you doing in your community? What are you doing in the space that you are in to ensure that Black people have an equal voice, that Black people are heard, that Black people have a seat at the table? What are you doing? What are you doing? So I'm going to just end there with the conversation. Like I said, the Black agenda is reparations to me. The Black agenda is reparations. Reparations in the form of education, economics, land, healthcare, therapy. All of that would be reparations. All of it would be reparations. And then we'll take a check. If you want to throw in a check, I ain't going to turn down no check. You know what I'm saying? I ain't going to turn it down. But, Lana says she won't vote for him. Y'all, when it comes to voting, I just get so about voting, I guess I do. I'm not going to say don't vote. I do think that we should vote. Voter suppression is real, as we saw with the recent primaries, and the machines now working in Black neighborhoods, and Black people, have being forced to wait on the line outside in the sun for hours and hours and hours. We saw all of that. Voter suppression is real. Do I think we should vote? Yes, we should vote. But who are we voting for? I'm tired of the lesser of two evils narrative. That's how Hillary lost, because a lot of Black people was like, for us, it don't even matter. But I think in this specific election, when we have Trump versus Biden, and I'm just going to be honest with y'all. I'm just going to be honest. One thing about Trump, first off, he's a horrible person. He's a racist. He's a bigot. He's horrible. His actions have been horrible. His words have been horrible. A lot of the things he does is terrible. However, with Trump, one thing I appreciate, I'd rather you look me in my face and say, I can't stand your ass. I don't like your ass. I don't want you here. I'd rather you look me in my face and tell me how you really feel than for you to act like you love me and behind my back destroy me or try to destroy me. One thing about Trump is he looks us in our face and tells us exactly how he feels. Do y'all see that he is going to Tulsa on Juneteenth? Juneteenth, to give his speech. The level of disrespect. If you don't know the history of Tulsa, Tulsa was a Black community that was bombed. We pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps, built Tulsa. Our ancestors worked hard to build their own Black economy, their own Black healthcare system, everything in Tulsa. And it was bombed and destroyed by white folks. If you're not aware, Juneteenth is the day, June 19th, 1865, was the day that the Emancipation Proclamation was read in Texas. Texas was the last Confederate state to free their slaves and to read aloud the Emancipation Proclamation. Once the Emancipation Proclamation, think about what a proclamation is, once the Emancipation Proclamation was read in the state, that meant that that state was required to free their slaves. So a lot of people think that, oh, Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. It was brought forth in 1863, but they had to go state to state to state to state to state to state to read it. It wasn't until the proclamation was read in that specific state that it was actually valid in that state, right? That's how the Emancipation Proclamation worked. So it took over 2 years for it to be read from state to state to state. And Texas was the final state, June 19th, 1865. Texas was the final state to receive a reading of the Emancipation Proclamation. So that's what Juneteenth is, June 19th, 1865. So they call it Freedom Day because it was the date, it was the date that the last slaves were officially to be freed in Texas. Now, for him to do that, June 19th, 2020, when I say him, I'm talking about Trump, for him to get that speech on Juneteenth in Tulsa, is just completely disrespectful. But I say that and I bring that up to highlight the level of in your face, I don't like y'all asses that Trump is. The thing about Hillary and Biden and so many other politicians that kind of bothers me is it's covert racism. And if you know anything about racism, you know that there's covert and there's overt. So covert is basically exactly how it sounds. It's covered, it's undercover racism, low-key racism. That's the smile in your face, but behind your back, I'm stabbing you. Then you have overt, blatant acts of racism, like what Trump does. Trump is overtly prejudiced, racist, bigoted. A lot of other politicians are covertly. When it comes to voting, I feel like we're being asked to vote. Do you prefer overt or covert? That's what it seems like to me. Because when we look at the record of a lot of politicians, their record has been racist. Their record has been prejudiced, at the very least prejudiced against Black people. When we look at the crime bill, it was prejudiced against Black people. If you don't know about the crime bill, that's where they extended the sentences for crack versus cocaine. As we know, crack was dropped off in the Black community. So it's basically the reason and the way that mass incarceration in the prison industrial complex, which is the new form of slavery, the way that they were able to keep slavery going is through the crime bill in which Joe Biden wrote. He wrote it. Those are his words. So when we think about Joe Biden versus Trump, basically we're being asked, do we want to vote for overt racism or covert racism? And the reason that Joe Biden is covert prejudice or covert racist now is because now he's trying to put on a smile in our face and he's trying to pretend that he is for us. However, look at everything we had to do just to get a lift every voice is his Black agenda, lift every voice. And he had the nerve to call it the Black Manifesto. That's what he accidentally referred to it. I don't know if y'all watched the interview with Charlemagne. Yes, K-Dog, it's definitely pick your poison thing. I don't know if y'all watched the interview with Charlemagne. Joe Biden did a lot of Freudian slips. If you don't know what Freudian slips are, shout out to Sigmund Freud, but it's basically the idea that what is going on in your unconscious mind slips out of your mouth. He did a lot of Freudian slips. He was trying to consciously wear a face and wear the mask and act like he's, I'm for y'all. And yes, I care about Black people and I love Black people. but his unconscious mind, which is where your truth lies, his unconscious mind slipped up and allowed those thoughts to come out his mouth, where he thinks that that lift every voice thing is a black manifesto. That's how he referred to it. For him to say, you ain't black if you don't vote for me, you know, he basically lifted the veil without even realizing that he was lifting it. But when it comes to voting, that's essentially what we're asking ourselves. Do we want overt versus covert? I don't think, I would hope, as we know, black folks, we always been hopeful. We always been hopeful. We always hope for more. We always pray that we're going to get more. We always pray that we're going to get better. We know that as black folks, we have a tendency to do that. But the true question is, do we really think that Joe Biden is going to do anything different than what Trump is doing? Do we really think that he will? Or is he just going to make us feel better about doing it? I feel like he's just going to make us feel better about doing it. So when it comes to voting in this next election, that's up to each and every black person. Voter suppression is real. So you got to ask yourself, are you willing to wait in the long lines? Are you willing to, deal with the suppression, deal with the issues that's going on to go out and vote? With the goal of getting Joe Biden into office because you want something different, or you just trying to take a chance? Are we taking a chance on hope? Those are all questions that we got to ask ourselves as black folks. For me personally, am I going to vote? I'm deciding, y'all. As they say, I'm going to pray on it. Okay, I'm going to pray on it. All right, I'm going to vote in these primaries. I'm going to vote for the primaries. But for the final, y'all, I'm going to pray on it. I just said I'm a vote. I don't know. I'm gonna pray on it. I'm still deciding because I don't know. I just need Biden to do just a little bit more. And for me, it really comes down to who his VP pick is. Depending on his VP pick will determine. It will determine a lot for me. I want to see who his VP pick is. I want to see, he said that he committed that he'll have a black woman in the Supreme Court. He vowed that he will have a woman as his VP pick. But I really want to see who's going to be his VP pick. Even though he said he's going to definitely have a woman, I honestly feel like I wouldn't be surprised if he pop up with Andrew Cuomo. I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if he pop up with Andrew Cuomo. Some people are saying Stacey Abrams. I don't know if he's gonna have Stacey. I would be happy, but I don't know if he's gonna have Stacey. Some people are saying Kamala Harris. And as we know, a lot of black folks was upset with Kamala over her past record as a prosecutor, and the fact that she wanted to lock up black parents if their kids committed truancy and didn't go to school and stuff like that. We must not forget that, even though she did not, according to her record, she had not arrested any black people for truancy, but she threatened it, which that brings us to concern of, if black folks, is that always going to be your threat? Is your threat always going to be police and locking us up and enslaving us, essentially? Because when you lock a black person up, you're enslaving them. So is that always going to be your resort? And that's another thing, y'all. We got to stop playing with the language. We got to remind them of what their system is. When you lock a black person up, you are enslaving them according to the 13th Amendment, okay? That is what you are doing. So is your threat always going to be the enslavement of black people? Is your way to get the numbers up always going to be the enslavement of black people? We got to ask ourselves that. I love Kamala Harris. I appreciate her presence as a black woman. That's what I should say. I appreciate her presence as a black woman. We need, and even if we don't all agree, we need to see black folks. And we need to be able to have conversations about politics with black people, because even if she goes against the black agenda, at least she's somewhat aware of the black experience, So that's the value of having black folks present in politics, no matter what side they lie on. Candace Owens, can't stand her, but Candace Owens, she's anti-black to the core. She has horrible views, detrimental views. She's a black woman though, and I know that somewhere in her mind, she's still very much aware of the black experience. But yeah, I'm going back to read some of y'all comments. Then I'm really gonna get up out of here. Unless you said unless he's going catatonic, doesn't even matter who his VP is. Okay, now Lana, I honestly think we got to look at Joe. We got to look at Joe. I think for Joe, his VP matters because I wish him well. But if you look at Joe, I don't think Joe gonna be with us. Joe ain't looking, free health care for everybody. I don't think Joe gonna make it 8 years. Amy K. You said Amy K really. Okay, y'all. All right, y'all. I just went back to read some of y'all comments. But okay, so I'm really about to get up out of here. I wish y'all well. Thank y'all so much for tuning in, for watching. Have these discussions in your community. Have these discussions with your family. Talk about healthcare. Talk about the Black agenda. Talk about, everything. Talk about everything. Talk about Black Lives Matter. When it comes to you said, well, sister, we need to talk about our last topic. Don't forget. Oh, solar. Okay, yes. Talk about, Black Lives Matter. Talk about the Black agenda. Solar, I want to have a whole separate live about that. So if y'all don't know, in my last live, if you didn't watch the last live I did, we talked about, I brought up colorism. And the last live was, is this the time? And I talked about Billy Porter bringing up LGBTQ plus issues. I talked about Asian doll bringing up colorism at this time. And the question was, is this the time? And I acknowledged that. I said, we have to recognize that there is homophobia in the Black community. There is colorism in the Black community. But I don't think this is the time to be publicly highlighting that when we are supposed to be unified with Black Lives Matter. This is not the time to be divisive. And I said, in acknowledging colorism, I said, I even have had to realize and acknowledge my light skin privilege. And I said, spoke on how when I was in college, one of my friends, who I'm friends with to this day, shout out to Andrea Janelle, follow her on Instagram. She's an amazing photographer, beautiful, beautiful Black woman. But she helped me realize, she explained to me what colorism was, and she helped me realize exactly what light skin privilege was. And I said, in that moment, I had to acknowledge my light skin privilege. And Solar left an amazing comment under that live. And essentially, he brought up the light-skinned Black male perspective, and he said that he disagreed with light-skinned privilege, and he acknowledged that maybe my experience as a light-skinned Black woman may be different. But he brought up how, look, he's putting the comment. Read the comment. He's putting the comment in. So I'm gonna read it. He said, as a brown slash light skin, I guess he meant Black male, I've never seen those privileges, yet that may only apply to light-skinned women. So he brought up how the stereotypes for light-skinned Black men have been that light-skinned Black men are weak, and not seen as not as strong. June Scott said, "Boy, bye." Now, the thing with light skin privilege, and this is full circle conversation because I started off this live by talking about privilege and how when we think about privilege, oftentimes dealing with white people, we think about wealth. But when I speak about privilege, and I think when everyone speaks about privilege, we have to keep in mind that it's not just the benefits of what you receive, it's about what you don't receive as well, and what does not happen to you as well, along with some of the things that you receive. But when I spoke about light skin privilege for me as a light skinned Black woman, and what my sister helped me realize as a chocolate sister, she had to point out to me things that I didn't even realize. She showed me music videos, how when I turned on BET, Black Entertainment Television, how most of the women on BET were lighter skinned women. When it came to TV shows, most of the Black people on Black TV shows on network television, for the most part, were lighter skinned Black people. How, you very rarely did you see, the brown paper bag. Jill said she had brown paper bag privilege. But think about the sororities and fraternities, the history of the AKAs, where it was for lighter skinned Black people. And I think that goes for Black men and Black women. It wasn't until Morris Chestnut hit the scene that Chocolate Brothers became popular and became sexy. And Morris Chestnut hit the scene in the 90s. So until then, there were not many examples of, beautiful dark-skinned brothers. There, to this day, we are just now seeing black women. Shout out to Viola Davis. We're just now seeing dark-skinned black sisters as leading roles on television shows on network television. So when I speak about light-skin privilege, I'm acknowledging the fact that growing up, I was able to see, when it came to our channels, I was able to see sisters who looked like me on TV on our channels regularly. You says everybody hates Angel talked about the sister. There's a hierarchy in our community and it's sick. Absolutely. And I honestly, I want to have like colorism be a whole nother live, because as I said in my last live, I don't think this is the time to highlight colorism. But I just wanted to clarify when I said and acknowledge my light skin privilege, that is what I'm acknowledging. And as my sister showed me, I had the privilege of being able to see, to be able to see sisters who look like me. I remember, and also to not even have to be concerned about certain things. I remember when my friend, when she was talking to me about it, she pointed out Pharrell videos fronting. I don't know if y'all remember Pharrell. You know you fronting, you know I want you back. That video. And she was like, this was the first time we saw a dark-skinned girl be the lead in a music video. Y'all, I hadn't even noticed that. Which in a sense is a privilege. It's a privilege to not have noticed that. You know what I'm saying? That's a privilege that wasn't even my attention, But that's all I mean when I say light skin privilege, And I do recognize that for men and women, it may be a bit different. But I feel like we cannot talk about colorism in our community if we are not honest and real about privileges on both sides. Privileges as light-skinned black men and light-skinned black women. Our history shows. Look at the brown paper bag test. Look at, sorority to fraternities. Look at television shows. Look at music videos. Look at Black Hollywood. We would be remiss if we did not acknowledge that book and that in our history. We would be remiss if we did not do that, I feel. But yeah, so that's all I meant. And I wanted to bring that up because I do feel like Solar had a great point in that comment. And Solar, I do see where you're coming from. I definitely, when it comes to light-skinned black men, I have heard that in the past that, light-skinned black men are weak and, are overly emotional, which unfortunately being emotional is an insult amongst men. So, light-skinned men are overly emotional and all that stuff. I have heard that in the past. And I thank you for bringing that up because I was not considering that. When I spoke about light skin privilege, I am speaking from the black woman perspective. And I do feel like it's completely wrong and it's horrible and it's horrific. And it's a conversation that I continuously have with my circle and my community. So once again, please keep having these conversations about the black agenda, about voting. I'm sorry, somebody was calling me, y'all. Have the conversations about voting. Have the conversations about, just our experience as black people and what we are expecting for. Have the conversations about our ask. And then once we have our ask clear and we are ask. Once we have our ass clear and we can push the black agenda, then we can, internally in our communities and in our circles, we can have these deeper conversations about what are we going to do as black people to ensure that our community is well. We can talk about, ending this whole colorism thing. We can talk about ending our brutality against each other. We can talk about promoting black love. We can talk about homophobia. We can talk about all of those things internally, in our circles. But when we are in the larger circle, we need to be pushing this black agenda. When we are in our inner circle, we can have the conversations about what we need to do as a community. Okay? So I'm out, family. I love y'all. Much peace, much light. This one is a lengthy one, and I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Thank you, Lana, Sola. It's so many of y'all to name. Thank you, Corey. I appreciate you. Thank you, June. Thank you, Jones. Thank you, everybody who commented. Thank you, Hope. I appreciate your insight, and I really appreciate Hope for her bravery, especially as a black woman who is in law enforcement and her bravery in speaking up and sharing her opinion. I appreciate that so much, Hope. So shout out to you. Once again, Lana, Carmine, Lauren, everybody. I appreciate y'all so much. Thank y'all for tuning in. Peace and light, family. And I'll see y'all